President Biden went on to be asked whether or not he expected Iran to hold off on a retaliatory strike if a ceasefire deal was reached. Biden said, and this is a quote, "That's my expectation." Is it also yours?
Not right now, it's not. I mean, the fact is the Iranians have not yet responded. The last time we went through this, April 1st, the Israelis struck a senior IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps general in Damascus. The Iranians waited almost 2 weeks to respond. I think they're generally ambivalent about this. They need and want to get even, but they need to do so in a way that doesn't trigger what they fear most, which is a massive Israeli retaliation that could draw in the United States. And we have so much hardware deployed that may well serve as a deterrent. The problem, of course, is that Israeli-Lebanese border is not going to stabilize or de-escalate unless you can get an Israeli-Hamas agreement. And right now, even though Middle East negotiations traditionally have two speeds, slow and slower, this one does not look good. Hamas says it's not coming to this putative meeting, this summit meeting in Doha. I think Yahya Sinwar, leader of Hamas, I think his clock is ticking very slowly. Now you come to the question of Prime Minister Netanyahu. His clock has been ticking slowly as well. That's the real problem here. At some point, the Iranians and Hezbollah are going to respond. The only hope to avert a major escalation is a ceasefire deal, and I just don't see it coming together right now.
When it comes to that response, Aaron, I spoke earlier here on Balance of Power with Michael Allen from Beacon Global Strategies about the priorities for Iran as it makes this consideration. Here's what he said.
They need to land a punch this time. So they need to figure out the combination of cruise missiles and or ballistic missiles and drones, some of which need to get through. But the hard part, the other thing they need to balance is that they don't want to be extraordinarily successful, and they don't want to kill too many civilians, because then that might risk a total war with the Israelis.
Aaron, are we getting a little too cute here with this idea of threading the needle, something that lands a punch, as Michael put it, but not outright war throughout the Middle East? We're playing with fire here, aren't we?
I mean, absolutely. Look what happened in July when an errant Hezbollah missile intended for an Israeli military position on Mount Hermon slammed into Masjid Shams, a Druze town in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, killing children and teens. That's how we got started on this other round. So no, I think precision strikes here in a way that's going to create enough de-escalation, not sufficient damage so that the Israelis won't respond. I think that's very hard. The other reality is it is not Iran that can do the most damage to Israel. It takes 12 minutes for a cruise missile to impact or be intercepted, launched from Iran. It takes, what, a minute and a half less for any of Hezbollah's high trajectory weapons to slam into not just northern Israel, but in lethality and range, they cover a good part of the country. And if they decided to saturate, you wouldn't just have a few civilians killed, you'd have large numbers. And then you really would be off to what the Middle East has never witnessed before, which is a multi-front war involving Israel, Lebanon, pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, and probably inexorably, not just an Israeli strike on Iranian assets and territory, but with it comes the real possibility of a direct involvement, not defensively, but offensively, by the United States. And wars have never been kind to American presidents. The last one that was FDR in World War II. The last thing this administration needs is a major escalation in the Middle East, which doesn't have, and it won't have, a conclusive and determinative sort of pro-American Hollywood ending. And that's where we are right now.
And do you expect, Aaron, that in the worst case scenario, if the U.S. is drawn materially into a conflict regionally in the Middle East, that will happen, that American troops will be on the ground or in the waters or in the air, whatever you want to say, by November, when voters are also heading to the polls to decide who they want to be the commander-in-chief?
Kelly, I have trouble deciding what I'm going to do next Tuesday. Trying to project out to November, I think, is a risky proposition. I will say this, that the U.S. will be very risk averse when it comes to how it uses those military assets. But just as an example of a backdoor to American involvement, pro-Iranian militias, as they've done, strike American bases and military deployments in Iraq and Syria. You get a large number of Americans killed. Then the U.S. really has probably only one response. They've responded against the militias, but in this case, if it was a mass casualty event, they'd respond directly against Iranian assets. So we could easily get there. But again, I don't want to end on a hopeful note. I think on an unhopeful note. I think there's a realistic possibility that by November, to use your metric, you could actually see an Israeli-Hamas agreement on a phase one ceasefire. That would be a limited exchange of hostages, a 6-week ceasefire, and the prospects of surging humanitarian assistance badly needed into Gaza. Beyond that, I think it's doubtful that you're going to see a conclusive and, again, determinative end to the Israeli-Hamas war in Gaza.
We're out of time here, Aaron, but the timeline there is peculiar. To what extent will it key off of anticipation around an American election?
Everybody, our allies and adversaries, they're all making their bets. They're all making their calculations. Some are trying to interfere directly in order to vote for their favorite candidate. But it's a very strange period between now and November when allies are concerned and adversaries are eager to take advantage.